Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Boma, Portugal session that we are starting right now. So let's kick it off with a lot of energy and vibrations. That's what we need right now. So I'm going to start this presentation with presenting our speakers that are here to share their knowledge and also their advice for us, so we can really be thoughtful about this moment that we are living in this moment now. So to begin, I will show you some of our speakers that are here today that you can see here. So let's kick it off with our session. So hello and welcome everyone to our session, Boma, Portugal in Kenya. My name is Marconi, and together with our Boma, Portugal team, we'll present the session. Just a quick intro to who we are and what we do. Boma is a decentralized network of local partners offering transformational learning experiencing. So that in a world of dramatic and continuous change, we can be more intentional, intelligent about the future. Last but not least, a shout out to our partners for this Boma COVID-19 Summit, Zoom and Facebook, for being with us in this journey, and all the Boma Global team members. Today we feature two main sessions from Portugal and Kenya. We'll kick off the first session called Tech in the Hands of the People in Need. To start, I'm going to introduce our very first speaker, Teemu Arina. So Teemu, he will be speaking from Finland, and is one of the forefront figures on the digital transformation of learning, work, leadership, health, and eventually the future of humanity. His work focuses on studying the intersection of man and machine, and ways to improve productivity, health, and well-being with biological and technological tools. So welcome, Teemu. This virtual stage is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. So without further ado, I will just jump into my presentation here. So I'm a biohacker, so I'm interested in the human body as a biological, technological system that can be understood and put under a test. And in case of viral infections like the COVID-19, I look at the human body as a computer that can be hacked so that you are not going to be that person who is in intensive care. Now, so my background, I'm a technologist. I'm not a medical doctor, but I do work with a medical doctor. We wrote together the Biohacker'S Handbook. It's over 500 pages, over 500 references, 1,500 references of over 500 pages. It's a massive work that dives deep into how you can optimize your lifestyle for better health and well-being. And recently I wrote the Biohacker'S Flu Guide, which is 60 pages and based on 266 studies, mainly meta-analysis published in the last few years. You can get it at biohack.to/flu download. So biohack.to/flu download. It's a free download for a limited time. Now, in that book, we dive deep into things that I'm covering in this presentation. So I'll give you a brief overview in the next few minutes. But from the book that you can get more thorough analysis as well as reasoning why we recommend certain things. Now, the world has become a massive petri dish for infectious diseases, and the COVID-19 is not going to be the only one that's going to be spreading around. If you look at the last 10 years, we have seen several different epidemics. Those have been luckily quite small, but it's likely that this one or next ones are going to be huge. And it was actually Joshua Lederberg, an American molecular biologist known for his work in microbial genetics, who said that the single biggest threat to mankind is continued dominance of the planet is the virus. Now, as a biohacker, I take 5 steps. So I guess 6 steps. The first, the number 0, is basically learn the mechanisms of action of this particular virus. Now, once you understand how it enters the body, so they are talking about receptors like ACE2 and several other mechanisms. Once you study those, you can understand how you can maybe prevent the entry of that virus. Now, as a biohacker, looking at viral infections, there's many things that you can do for seasonal flu as well as influenza to prevent its entry into your body. Now, it starts with the step 1, which is precaution, which is about preparation of your internal environment, that's your body and immune system, to be able to deal with potential pathogens. I stress that most of the things that you can do are actually beforehand, not once you get the infection. So most of the important stuff is what you do just before, for months, I would say. Second one is prevention. So how do you prevent getting it? By supporting your immediate physical environment. That might be how you filter your air, how you deal with your water sources, your supplies, food, and so on. Then there is number 3, which is avoidance, which is social distancing, active avoidance. Those are being covered probably elsewhere, so I'm not going to cover those. But number 4 is mitigation, which is how do you slow down replication of a virus in your system? How do you support your immune system? How you speed up recovery so that you bounce back? And so once you are clear of the virus, then how do you support other people? So I would go and test for antibodies, and if it seems that it's positive and you're likely to be immune, I would immediately get back to work and helping other people. Now, precaution, first step, which is about fortifying your immune system. If you look at your immune system, it actually requires a little bit of stimulation. In terms of exercise, you're actually damaging your body. If you exercise too much, you impair your immune system. If you don't exercise at all, you're actually impairing your immune system as well. So many things in nature are actually about balance. Chronic sleep deprivation impairs immunity. Poor diet does as well. As a biohacker, I would look at optimal dietary intake of nutrients. I would correct any kind of nutritional imbalances and so on, namely vitamin D, but many other things. I would avoid stress, add more meditation and relaxation techniques. I would stop consuming drugs like alcohol and tobacco. I'm going to cover that in a moment. And maybe move closer to nature. That has also shown multiple benefits for stimulation of the immune system. Now, quitting smoking, I think, is one of the big steps for anyone to take right now. Also, getting out of a big city with a lot of pollution. It has been shown that ACE2, which is the receptor through which nCoV-19 enters your system, increases in people who smoke cigarettes. So you have more of those gates through which the virus can enter your system. And in China and elsewhere also, men are some of the people who are more likely to get ill and also to get to critical care. In China alone, it's close to 30% of the population is smoking, and out of those, over 50% are men. So smoking increases the risk for nCoV-19. Another thing that increases your risk for complications is alcohol consumption. Excessive consumption of alcohol impairs the immune system and increases the vulnerability to lung infections. What I would do is I would boost something called hormesis in your body. Hormesis is a state which is beneficial for the body. During hormesis, your so-called reactive oxygen species reduce in number, and you build up your, your antioxidant capacity. And some of the mechanisms are nutritional. Exercise is one, not like heavy hardcore exercise, but regular exercise. Things like heat alteration, like sauna and ice swimming, as well as getting enough sunlight. Here's my co-author, medical doctor Olli Soviari, doing everything at once in a cold, icy river right after a sauna. He also has some intranasal photobiomodulation device going on there to push some red light into his brain. And there's many things you could do. He's taking some stress-reducing adaptogenic herbs right there. He's doing forest bathing, which in Japan is used to treat busy salarymen who are overstressed. They're sent to Finland, where I live, just to wander in the forest. Get enough sun. That's a good idea because you get vitamin D. Vitamin D is a power source for your killer T cells. Your T cells are basically dormant. They're not doing anything if you don't have circulating vitamin D. So on your cells, you have vitamin D receptors, and those rely on circulating vitamin D to activate and get after any disease-causing agents. There is also different benefits for different wavelengths of light, not just UV light that helps us generate vitamin D, but there's other wavelengths of light that have been discussed in literature to be potentially beneficial for the immune system. Infrared light, red light, and so on, wavelengths that are beyond also visible wavelengths of light are important. Blue light, by the way, is directly killing viruses and bacteria, which are airborne. If you open up your curtains, get some sunlight in, you're actually reducing the viral or bacterial load in your physical environment. Light has not just only vitamin D, which is stimulating, but also it modulates the immune system. It activates pathways related to longevity. So for the biomodulation is one thing that I use. What I have right here is actually a device that I stick into my nose, and it's producing the specific wavelength of light that activates in my mitochondria, the energy centers in your cells, the production of ATP, which is energy. But it also activates the reduction of reactive oxygen species, which is what we are kind of concerned about when you are talking about viral infections. Now, let's continue on this. I would get enough sleep and recovery. One of the markers that I would look at specifically is a combination of body temperature, heart rate variability, as well as resting heart rate. If all of those heart rate variability goes down and heart rate goes up, as well as body temperature goes up, you might be dealing with a viral infection already before you feel any clear symptoms. And literature shows that everything you do in the first 24 to 48 hours of infection is key. So taking like zinc as a supplement, for example, boosting vitamin D levels, very important in the first hours. And if you don't know from your symptoms, tracking things with a modern wearable like the Oura Ring might be a good idea. I would also fix my gut lining. Gut is the root cause of a lot of different diseases. L-glutamine has shown to be a beneficial agent in improving intestinal walls. Lactoferrin from colostrum is extremely beneficial for a number of processes in the body for stimulating the immune system and also fixing the gut. I would also increase my microbial diversity. Reduced microbial diversity has been linked to increased risk for illness and seasonal flus and so on. So supporting that with probiotics is a good idea, but also a diverse set of different food ingredients is important because different bacteria feed on different food sources. Now, Lactobacillus plantarum is one of the most studied one for boosting immune system, especially in the case of viral infections. I would also activate autophagy, which is the natural process through which your body is recycling damaged cells. This is what Yoshinori Oshumi got the Nobel Prize in 2016. One of the easiest way to activate autophagy is actually fasting, and intermittent fasting specifically. So in these times, I would go for less food than more food. It's very important for boosting up your immune system. There is some nutritional interventions like very strong spices that can also activate autophagy. Here is a recipe from our book. I would support my mitochondria, the energy centers in your cells. The elderly are more likely to die of COVID-19 and several other respiratory illnesses. Now, NAD might be one of the, reduction of NAD might be one of the leading reasons for that. There's many others, but mitochondrial dysfunction is definitely something that's not going to help you to fight off pathogens. Now, you can support your production of NAD in different ways. I would say ketosis and ketogenic diets are some of the most effective ways for boosting up your mitochondria. If I have diabetes or pre-diabetes, I would immediately get my blood values in correct ranges. Now, if ever, is a good moment to fix your lifestyle. There's nutritional therapies and interventions that are being studied that can help you to normalize a number of different biomarkers with just food, not drugs only. One of the things that I would track is something called GKI, glucose ketone index. So that's when you're getting more into a therapeutical ketosis if you're doing this type of diet. Now, in terms of prevention, there's several different technologies that people use for preparing their external environment. I would say a HEPA filter in your home is key. If you're at the office, I would use essential oils that kill airborne bacteria. I would use more advanced air filtration technologies as well. I would bring in air purifying plants. Plants also increase humidity. They can properly used if you suck the air in from your living room and through your through the root systems of your plants, you can filter out volatile organic compounds and many other compounds that are not trapped by HEPA filters. N95 respirators are not enough with COVID-19 because it measures 0.12 microns. N95 is 0.3 microns in diameter. Now, there is some technologies that you can definitely use, like N99 respirators. Here are some examples of more hardcore ones. So personally, I have one of these devices here that is actually uses some nanotechnology and it filters out bacteria and viruses. On my desk, I also have one of these cool devices that is using photocatalysis to directly degrade viruses and bacteria that are airborne. When I'm traveling, this is basically pushing air into my face. It creates kind of a vacuum and some turbulence, and none of the airborne particles get into me. So I use that when I travel. In terms of mitigation, if I feel any symptoms, I would increase my intake of vitamin D if it's not corrected. In terms of supplementation, I would immediately start taking zinc. And maybe taking vitamin C. Vitamin C is not really helpful for prevention of colds, but it is beneficial once you get an infection. So your consumption of vitamin C in your body increases, for example, with the influenza virus in this case. And vitamin C has actually shown to reduce the time spent in intensive care. If I go into public place, I would use zinc acetate or picolinate lozenges. Very important for reducing viral replication on your mucous membranes. Yeah, I mentioned vitamin C that can reduce duration of mechanical ventilation in critically ill patients. By the way, photobiomodulation might do that as well. There are some studies on rodents that it can cut down treatment time to half when used. I've helped some people with coronavirus, and the amount of symptoms they get is massively reduced with the use of photobiomodulation, but there is no human studies yet on specifically on this. I would boost my glutathione levels. Sulfur-rich foods are important building blocks for glutathione. Glutathione is the master antioxidant in your body. When you get a viral infection, your requirement for glutathione goes up because glutathione needs to mitigate reactive oxygen species throughout the body. There is some building blocks for this, some amino acids like cysteine that you get from food, but it can also be got from supplements like NAC, N-acetylcysteine. Also, sulfuric compounds are cofactors, as well as selenium. Selenium is very important here. Many people take zinc, but I would also take selenium. It protects from oxidative stress. When you get a viral infection, increase oxidative stress, and selenium is what you need. So maybe 2 or 3 Brazil nuts are enough for daily intake. And medicinal mushrooms. Medicinal mushrooms have been studied in the past for many things, and many of our antibiotics come from mushrooms. But there are very interesting compounds in so-called polypore mushrooms like chaga and reishi and shiitake. Shiitake you might know from grocery stores. I would eat more shiitake and maybe other mushrooms as well. But if I get any viral infection, I would take like triple extract or double extract with alcohol and water out of these, because the beta-glucans in there can stimulate the production of macrophages, and macrophages are eating away as part of your immune system some of the pathogens that have entered your body. I would also boost nitric oxide. There are some supplements that help with this, like beetroot as well as citrulline malate is another one. By the way, traditional Finnish sauna and going in a hot room that increases nitric oxide production. So I would take like some borscht, maybe some beetroot soup, and go in a sauna, increase my nitric oxide production. This is why nasal breathing and like deep breathing is also effective against pathogens in the airways. There are some nutraceuticals that have potential for boosting interferon response to RNA viruses. The coronavirus is an RNA virus. One of them is ferulic acid, some of the highest amounts you get in chocolate. Alpha-lipoic acid is another one. Spirulina is a seafood that I would go after. N-acetylcysteine, selenium, I already mentioned, zinc, and yeast has huge numbers of beta-glucans. By the way, I wouldn't go for elderberry syrups because elderberry increases interleukin-6, and it's one of the reasons why people get into a cytokine storm. So the problem with the immune system is that if you boost too much of it, one of the end result is cytokine storm that kills patients, and that's where the damage comes from. So I would boost the immune system before, but if I get a viral infection and it progresses into later stages, hospitalization and proper medical care is very important. What may not work
Teemu,
based on studies, this is my last slide, sir,
yes.
is paracetamol, anti-inflammatory drugs, antihistamines. These can increase the duration of the disease. Multivitamins don't work. Echinacea doesn't seem to work. Cough medications don't work. So, you don't want to impair your immune system. You get a fever for a reason. You get a cough for a reason. You get muscle aches for a reason. Those are interferons working. If you dampen down that signal, you're dampening your immune system response and you increase the duration of these things. Now, if you're interested, take a look at biohacker.to/flu download. So biohacker.to/flu download, you can get the guide over there. With that, optimize your health and performance. Now is a good moment to start in a very full way. I think the coronavirus is a really good reason to start a healthy lifestyle. With
Amazing.
That, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Teemu. You've been so clear, so helpful with all this information. So we're gonna jump just directly to Alex Lightman, because Alex has a great vision about your work. Actually, he follows all your work. So I will do this introduction to Alex, and then he may bring some of the compliments for your talk. So thank you very much, Teemu. So Alex Lightman is a CEO, author, and policy advisor, one of the pioneers of the wearable computing. He has an intense track record in developing national policy to accelerate innovation, defense analysis, internet protocols, IPv6, 4G. He worked advising policy for the United States. So he's talking about the war that we didn't prepare for. So welcome to our stage, Alex Lightman.
1,885 people that we know to be infected. The real number is probably between 3 and 5 million at least. Deaths are 16,382, and recovered is 101,520. If you look here on closed cases, you see that 101,520 people are recovered or discharged, and we have 16,228. That death rate of closed cases is 14%. And when I first started cutting and pasting these statistics a few weeks ago, it was 7%. And many people were saying, oh, well, that's just because most people aren't tested and we haven't seen it, but it will go down. So all of the predictions, all the criticism were that it would go down from 7%. In fact, it's increased from 7% to 14%. So the death rate for closed cases has doubled. Now, I say this because there's some debate that's in the press right now about whether or not we can call this a war. And so I want to settle that by saying that a war, according to the United Nations, is a conflict between people that results in the deaths of more than 1,000 people in a year, in 12 months. And so right now, as I've just shown you, this year, and the quarter is not even over, in 1/3 of a year, we have 16,000 deaths. So this is actually a pretty big war. I believe that millions of people will die. And so part of this talk is to say it's the war we didn't prepare for. And you think I'm talking about COVID-19. I am, but I'm more talking about COVID-20. And I'm talking about other things, because there's this idea that this is a false notion, that this is a once in 100-year pandemic. In fact, there are multiple coronaviruses, and though nature took millions of years to come up with 6 coronaviruses, just one lab has doubled that number. So there are more than 6 more things. And one of the things that you have to do overall, if you take one action as a result of this, it's to oppose the research for gain of function. So the idea of gain of function is that you infect an animal, such as a ferret or a civet or a bat, and then you put it among a lot of other things like it, and then they all get sick, and you find the sickest one. You go, oh, great, this is even sicker than the others. And you're trying to increase 3 things: the virulence, or the level of which it can be contagious, the pathogenicity, and basically you want to make it more contagious, more deadly, and you want to have the symptoms be delayed. And there are actually job postings at a lab in Wuhan which says, we want you to create viruses that suppress the symptoms for as long as possible. So this is a designed organism. And these articles that have gone out saying, well, it can't be because of this, this, and this, and they wouldn't have done that and that, because this work is an outgrowth. Where this came from is that the laboratory in Wuhan discovered this 12 years ago. You can go to my Facebook page. The article is there. It's all published 2008. And it says that this SARS-CoV couldn't go in to the ACE2 receptor, but then we changed it, the amino acids between 320 and 538. And once we made that change, we were able to penetrate with the ACE2 receptor. So it's right there in a paper. It's been around for 12 years. The person who did this research, Zhengli Shi, who then went and got grants at UNC. And what they did is they basically gave infected ferrets, groups of ferrets, and then they go and just, you know, if you have enough ferrets, it's just like you can have an army of monkeys eventually typing the works of Shakespeare. If you have enough ferrets and you have millions of dollars and you can keep on infecting them over and over again, you can eventually make things have gain of function and make them more contagious. And so I'm not saying that this was released on purpose. I'm not saying it was accidental. Who knows? There are incidences of people working in labs in China who sold laboratory animals to be eaten at a marketplace. So this is a matter of fact. People have been prosecuted for this. And there have also been leaks. And this is, by the way, not to pick on China, because the US also funded this work. The National Institutes of Health funded it, US AMRID funded it, and also USAID funded it. So both China and the US funded the same work that led to what we are suffering from now. So to get very, very practical, here are basically 4 things that you should have with you. 1, you should have a little envelope of cash. Why? Because sometimes what we find is that history doesn't rhyme, but history doesn't repeat, but it does rhyme. And so if you go and you study what happened during the influenza, the so-called Spanish flu, which actually also originated in China, and people in Spain call it the Dutch flu. I have no idea why. But what happened is that when people needed ambulances to take them to the hospital, sometimes the drivers would require a bribe. They didn't start out that way, but if you have 20 people all calling you at once and you have to decide who's going to take, you have to be able to slip them some money. And the other thing is that when hospital beds are out, what they also did in 1918 was they also sometimes had to slip a bribe to get a hospital bed. I'm not saying that that's how it should be. I'm just simply saying that that's what happened in the last influenza, and you can either do it or not. You should have your passport so that you have an ID, and also in case there's a true disaster in your country and everything's falling apart, so that you have the possibility of leaving, because you may find yourself sometime going out for food, having a whole disaster, looting, something could go out of control, and you may just need to leave. Another thing that you will want to have is that you will want to have a test. So this is my test for SARS-CoV-2 RNA, not detected. And because people will want to know, you're going to have to have something like this to get into stores at some point in the future. You're going to have to do it to visit people. And if you've never had asthma, you still want to try and get one of these. This is an inhaler. And basically it has something called albuterol in it. Just go shake it up like that. And then you go, and it frees up and opens up your lungs. And you may not think that that's important. I had asthma before, then didn't have it, didn't set foot in a hospital for 30 years. And then suddenly, a week ago Saturday, I found myself unable to breathe. And I almost didn't make it. I didn't want to get anyone else sick. So I walked to the hospital. First time I'd been admitted to a hospital in more than 30 years. And this is what they basically gave me to help me to start breathing again. Another thing that you want to do, it's true what Teemu said about masks, but you don't have to just have a mask. You want to bling up your mask, but bling it up from the inside. You can bling it up from the outside. And what you want to do is to take a paper towel and fold it up a few times. And then you want to have something like, I have an oil of it, but there's something called thieves oil. Thieves oil has remarkable ingredients in it. It basically has clove oil and lemon peel and cinnamon and rosemary. And this is called thieves oil because during the bubonic plague, during the Black Death, when people would die, there would be people who wanted to go into their house and steal stuff. And so they passed around that the way that you wouldn't get the plague if you went into the house was to spray your mouth with thieves oil. It burns, and also stick it in your ears and put it in your nose. And it does burn, but it burns good. And so you basically get you spray it on here, and then you put this in your mask. And you also, if you can, you want to have eucalyptus oil and clove oil, and you put that on. And so you should stink. There's a guy in an X-Files episode, Mulder said, stinks. And the guy said, stinky's good. Well, stinky's good here. And I was shocked when I went to the hospital, which is rated #1 to pick up my results. They made me come to the hospital to get them because CDC didn't give them. They told me to come and get them. So I wore my mask. And the lady at the hospital said, oh, what's that smell? And I said, well, it's cloves and thieves oil. And as it turned out, even though hundreds and hundreds of people were coming to the hospital with masks, nobody was doing these things. These have antiviral properties. So basically, I just want to emphasize and add, and this is what I arranged also with Marconi ahead of time, was that I would make comments and anything that I felt that could complement what Teemu had to say, that I would add it. So I just want to go over really quick and show you other things that I'm taking. So basically, I'd say for tea, I highly recommend this Virugo Max tea with Coriolis drops and Astragalus drops, and also Bhutanese wild cordyceps. So cordyceps is a very important thing, and Teemu mentioned it, but I want to hype it up. I want to say cordyceps is really, really, really important. So here's a question I ask people all the time, and maybe 1 in 1,000 gets it right. And you're gonna go, oh, I got that, but most people don't. So here's the question. What element of the periodic chart of the elements are you and I mostly made of? Now, most people say water. Water's not an element. There's no water on the periodic chart of the elements, so that's wrong. And then people say hydrogen, also wrong. That's number 3. And people say carbon, that's number 2. But the number 1, you probably have guessed it by now, is oxygen. So by mass, we're about 60% oxygen. So one of the wars that we're fighting with now is the war to make sure that we stay 60% oxygen. And there's also a good measure of how well you process oxygen. It's your maximum ventilatory capacity measured in milliliters of oxygen per kilogram of body weight per minute. And that's VO2 max. So I would ask you, how many of you know right now what your VO2 max is? Most gyms are closed. So if everything wasn't closed, if you have a way of doing it, if you're in a hospital and you have the ability to test your VO2 max, do so. Because in general, all other things being held equal, 2 twins, both get it, whatever, if one has a higher VO2 max, they have a greater chance of survival than one that doesn't. Because there are 4 components of VO2 max, and that could be a whole lecture in itself. But the bottom line is, it has to do with your tidal volume. How much lung capacity do you have? So anything that can build up your lung capacity is good. There's the how efficiently you take the oxygen and take it from your lungs into your hemoglobin. And this is the part that's attacked. This is the part that after the cytokine storm and the ripping apart of your epithelial cells and all that from the virus that leaves people with lung damage. And then there's basically how elastic your arteries and veins and capillaries are. How good is the circulatory system, the highway of your blood? And then it's how well does it offtake the hemoglobin into your cells? You want to be working on all these, and I want to emphasize that you really want, as Teemu said, to do regular exercise. And what kind of exercise? If you can get a home treadmill and you can have the HEPA filters and all the stuff here and all the plants, and my ceiling, by the way, is covered with plants. I have all these plants. All that stuff is yes. You want to be able to run as much as possible because that's the #1 way that you boost your VO2 max. So going quickly through this beta glucagon, cordyceps, you can get it in all kinds of different forms. Clove leaf, you want to be sniffing cloves, you just fall in love with cloves. Prednisone is a very good thing to have because it opens up your lungs. As far as food, this kind of thing has very antiviral properties. Yellow Barn, Biodynamic Pasta Sauce. I don't make any commission on selling any of these things, and especially the Yellow Barn Biodynamic Tomato Concentrate. You want to try and have some spaghetti, pasta things with these kind of things. They have good antiviral properties. Probiotics, as Teemu said, nitric oxide boosting, polyphenomenal. This is a bulletproof product. Vitamin C. I would recommend up to, if you can stand it, you may get diarrhea. That's okay. It's not a big deal. 9,000 milligrams a day and or micrograms a day. And basically, you want to, let's see, here I have this. Okay, you want to be careful with it though. You can also get it intravenously. I got an intravenous thing with max vitamin C and it gave me an asthma attack. It's why I went to the hospital. Astragalus. And then this is the stuff that you may find it harder to get, but if you can get albuterol, a box of albuterol, and you can get a nebulizer mask, that can save your life. There are not enough ventilators. They're not even nearly enough. So the poor man's ventilator is albuterol sulfate, basically comes in these little packages here, and a nebulizer mask can kind of save you time because if you're can't breathe, then every minute counts. And then also you have this Tamiflu tablets. Now, 2 more things. Teemu talked about bacterial load, and there's also parasite load. The whole reason that we have sex for reproduction is because of parasite load. Because if you're an immortal organism and you're complex, you're going to accumulate parasites that you can't get rid of. But by having sex and starting you and someone else all over again, you start free of parasites, theoretically. And so another thing that our leaders and our medical people should be telling us is about the viral load. And there's 2 things that 2/3 of people have, and they're constantly wearing down your immune system. Now, when you're a kid, when you're a child, before puberty, you have a thymus. A thymus is like a mini heart up here, and the thymus is the finishing school for the immune system. And you have these cells that come out of your bones, and they go attach to the thymus, and through sort of osmosis, and they learn what's you and what's not you. Now, if you have lupus or you have Hashimoto syndrome, they don't know what's you. Now, what happens is this terrible, terrible design flaw. And that design flaw is that the thymus degrades when it's exposed to testosterone or estrogen, both of which come up for men and women respectively during puberty. So your thymus shrinks, and it goes from being big and red like a California strawberry at puberty to, by the time you're in your 50s, this little shriveled black thing like a peanut. It can be regrown, but there isn't enough time. But ideally, we would all have regrown our thymus if we had time for this. But what
so
you have,
Alex, it's amazing. It's a lot of stuff. So, but I'll have to just cut you because we're in title control. But you brought a lot of stuff. So could you make after this document that you can share this? But in a sense that we should be very careful about how we use this, because
can I say the 2 viruses that you have to get rid of now, if you can, to reduce the viral load? The first one is you want to get rid of herpes simplex 1. 2/3 of people have it. 2/3 of people have herpes. It's constantly degrading your immune system. And so this idea that, oh, we're going to get rid of this virus with a vaccine, we haven't gotten rid of herpes simplex 1. So it's not, this virus may be with us for a long time. And the second thing is cytomegalovirus. no symptoms, but it's there degrading your immune system because your immune system, and there are treatments, but we're out of time for this. So you can look it up or you can contact me. Thank you for this time and attention. I appreciate the chance to share this information with you.
Thank you very much, Alex. I really appreciate your work and your very thoughtful comments. So continue on our program. We'll be switching now from English to Portuguese because I'm going to invite Onicio Neto. Onicio, grande amigo, tudo bem? Ao trabalhar com grandes inovações revolucionárias na área de saúde por 10 anos, Onicio tem a missão de acelerar a transformação digital de saúde e epidemiologia baseado em dados. Ele construiu a Epitrack para encurtar a distância entre a saúde e o conhecimento científico. Onicio hoje está baseado na Suíça, onde faz seu pós-doc na Universidade de Zurich. Bem-vindo, Onicio. Quebra tudo.
Valeu, Marconi. Vamos lá. Estou compartilhando minha tela aqui rapidamente para a gente iniciar isso. Bom, estão vendo minha tela aí?
Sim.
Pronto, vamos lá. Bom, o que eu queria falar para vocês hoje, não apenas o pessoal do Boma Portugal, mas também o pessoal que está acompanhando no Brasil, é como a gente consegue monitorar epidemias através de vigilância participativa. E eu acho que algumas pessoas no Brasil devem ter visto essa matéria em que o presidente do Einstein mencionou que para cada caso notificado existem 15 que estão por aí sem serem rastreados. Isso é muito grave, porque a gente não tem como saber a dimensão que a epidemia está tomando se a gente não consegue metrificá-la, quantificá-la. E aí existe esse gráfico super interessante do Dr. Max Molinsky, da Epidemics, que ele mostra uma comparação entre como é feito hoje e o que poderia ser feito se a gente utiliza algumas tecnologias específicas para combater as epidemias. Bom, então, essa é a situação como acontece hoje, tá? A pessoa adoece, a pessoa ela só vai ser contabilizada como um caso de doença, oficialmente, para o sistema de saúde, não importa se é público ou privado, quando ela chega no sistema de saúde, tá? Então, esse gráfico está representando isso. As pessoas adoecem e aí ela demora para chegar, para ser contabilizada, e aí quando ela contabiliza, existe um acumulado de casos e isso acaba acometendo mais pessoas. Quando existe médicos e enfermeiros mais sensíveis na ponta, essa notificação ela melhora porque os profissionais de saúde estão mais sensibilizados, eles estão entendendo que existe ali uma alteração no padrão, existe uma atipia na notificação do número de casos, e aí esses casos eles vão ser notificados de maneira mais rápida, mas eles continuam persistindo na maneira de notificar apenas quando eles entram no sistema. Quando é implementado a lógica de rede de sentinela, que é uma estratégia fantástica para diversas doenças, você consegue reduzir o número de casos, mas você continua identificando da mesma forma. Você só continua contabilizando os casos que entram no sistema. Mas quando você começa a trabalhar com uma coisa chamada detecção digital de doenças, e mais especificamente, quando você começa a trazer a população para perto do governo, no sentido da população, do usuário, do cidadão, ser uma fonte de informação, você consegue identificar essa tendência de caso de maneira antecipada, fazendo com que menos casos ocorram e facilitando a maneira de como a epidemia pode ser manejada. Mas isso não é uma coisa nova, não, tá? Desde 1996, o mundo tem ferramentas à sua disposição. Tudo começou com um grupo chamado ProMed. O ProMed hoje tem representação em diversos países. Aí no Brasil, o ProMed é liderado por um médico, amigo meu, Dr. Rodrigo Gerami, da Unicamp. O ProMed ele serve distribuindo essas informações relevantes que ele sai capturando na internet sobre epidemias e surtos de doença. Então, é uma ferramenta fantástica naquele componente de detecção digital de doenças que eu acabei de falar. Em 2003, aqui na Europa, surgiu a InfluenzaNet, que é uma rede que tem vários países participantes, em que cada país desse tem sua própria plataforma para coletar sintomas. Então, o usuário cidadão vai lá e reporta os sintomas por esses sites desses países específicos. E a InfluenzaNet congrega todos esses sites que tem na Holanda, na Bélgica, em Portugal, na Itália, no Reino Unido. Eles fazem congrega todas as informações, possibilitando entender como é que está a atividade de influenza no território. tentando aí preencher aquela lacuna que eu tinha mencionado no início, entre o indivíduo adoecer e ele chegar no hospital, então, ou na unidade de saúde. Então, o InfluenzaNet acaba sendo uma ferramenta muito interessante para tentar melhorar a acessibilidade do sistema. Nos Estados Unidos, em 2011, o FluNeU começou. Ele faz também uma coisa muito semelhante. Então, as pessoas baixam o aplicativo ou entram no website, reportam sintomas e, a partir disso, é possível estimar a atividade, né, a ocorrência de surtos de influenza lá aqui no território americano. E essas fontes de dados, o FluNeU, por exemplo, ele tem vários estudos científicos que mostram que ele consegue antecipar em até 2 semanas a identificação de um possível surto em relação às fontes tradicionais. Imagina o gestor de saúde no Brasil ou em Portugal tendo 2 semanas de antecipação a informação onde a epidemia vai surgir. Você consegue implementar várias ações de controle de intervenção de maneira muito mais otimizada. No Brasil, a primeira plataforma de escala nacional utilizando essa mesma abordagem foi lá em 2014, durante a Copa do Mundo. Naquela época existia um medo sobre o surto, sobre a epidemia de sarampo que estava acontecendo e a gente precisaria de uma ferramenta que viesse complementar o sistema tradicional de vigilância à saúde, e aí o Ministério da Saúde adotou e usou oficialmente uma plataforma chamada Saúde na Copa, que funcionava exatamente para fazer isso, monitorar e detectar esses casos nesse limbo que existe entre você ficar doente e você chegar na unidade de saúde. Em 2016, a gente fez a mesma coisa para as Olimpíadas, também nessa mesma lógica de tentar aprimorar e complementar o sistema de vigilância à saúde. Então, de maneira bem rápida, vamos pegar o exemplo aqui da epidemia de coronavírus, tá? Está acontecendo aí em vários lugares do mundo. Então, você tem um grupo de suscetíveis. Desse grupo de pessoas que são suscetíveis, parte delas serão infectadas. Sendo que só parte das infectadas vão chegar aqui na unidade de saúde, tá? Nos hospitais, do sistema público ou privado. E percebam que existe uma lacuna grande aqui entre os indivíduos que são infectados, que desenvolvem a doença ou não, e os que são notificados pelo sistema de saúde. O que acontece com essa área cinzenta? Casos ficam aí sem a gente sequer entender a dimensão. Esses são os 15 casos, por exemplo, que o presidente Einstein falou naquela matéria que eu mostrei no início. A vigilância participativa, ela tem o objetivo de recuperar esses casos. A vigilância participativa consegue trazer uma realidade muito próxima do que está acontecendo no ponto de vista epidemiológico, aprimorando a informação que a vigilância em saúde pode ter. Então, ela funciona onde o indivíduo pode baixar um aplicativo ou se engajar através de um website, reportar seus sintomas e esses dados são coletados em tempo real. E lá na nuvem, nos servidores, as diversas instituições que desenvolvem ferramentas como essa ao redor do mundo, elas utilizam uma inteligência, os algoritmos que vão procurar padrões. Padrões de grupos de pessoas com os mesmos sintomas no mesmo espaço e ao mesmo tempo. Quando eles encontram esse tipo de padrão, ele tem como saber uma área que eventualmente pode ser o início de um surto ou uma epidemia. Daí essa informação ela fornece um conhecimento para os gestores, para os tomadores de decisão, de fato gerar uma intervenção de maneira otimizada no território. Mas não só isso. Elas também empoderam o cidadão, já que o cidadão está me informando lá no início da cadeia, dados de saúde dele, sintomas que ele está sentindo, essa informação volta para que o cidadão também se empodere em relação a conhecer quão saudável é a comunidade em que ele vive. E aí existe esse trabalho científico fantástico que mostra a comparação, e acho que fica muito claro, né, com essa figura que está aqui, a comparação entre o sistema tradicional de vigilância em saúde, onde você tem aqui uma hierarquia, você tem diversos níveis de acesso, você tem diversas camadas de burocracia muitas vezes, e a informação ela acaba se perdendo aqui nesse meio, a informação ela fica imprecisa, muitas vezes a gente tem num site no site de uma fonte oficial diz um número, no site da Secretaria do Estado diz outro número, e o cidadão fica perdido em meio a tudo isso. Quando você parte para a abordagem participativa, o cidadão, o usuário, o indivíduo, ele passa a ser uma fonte primária de informação, de maneira que a gente consegue aprimorar a sensibilidade do sistema de vigilância em saúde, conhecendo melhor a situação epidemiológica. Eu tive uma experiência muito interessante durante a Copa do Mundo, onde a gente implementou uma tecnologia como essa, E durante os 2 meses da Copa do Mundo, a gente teve mais de 7 mil usuários ativos reportando de maneira regular se eles tinham ou não algum sintoma e que tipo de sintoma era esse para a gente caracterizar esses grupos de doença. Então, aqui, para vocês terem uma ideia de alguns números, a gente, por exemplo, identificou durante a Copa do Mundo mais de 200 pessoas com síndrome diarreica. Isso de maneira geolocalizada, em tempo real, proporcionando esse ganho de informação para a saúde. Esse paper está publicado, quem tiver mais curiosidade de saber mais algum detalhe, pode ir na web buscar isso. Também fizemos isso para as Olimpíadas, como eu falei, também o paper vai ser publicado. Mais de 7 mil usuários participando, onde a gente encontrou, por exemplo, mais de 140 pessoas com síndrome compatível para arbovirose, síndrome enzimática compatível para arbovirose, identificando aí eventuais casos de dengue, zika e chikungunya. E para o coronavírus, acho que a gente está juntando esforços para tentar utilizar essa tecnologia para controlar de alguma forma esse desafio que está acontecendo em vários países, inclusive no Brasil. O Colab, que é a maior plataforma colaborativa do Brasil, com mais de 300 mil usuários, se juntou com a Epitrack, que é uma referência internacional na área de epidemiologia digital, e a gente está criando um movimento chamado Brasil Sem Corona, onde a gente vai conseguir, através desses dados, resolver o problema da subestimação do número de casos, entender melhor a identificação das áreas de risco, tentar melhorar o ruído de comunicação entre o governo e o cidadão e desenvolver e aí suportar secretarias de saúde dos municípios e dos estados com informação estratégica para que eles consigam priorizar as intervenções. E além disso, da gente saber o que está acontecendo nesse momento, a gente também está buscando entender como é que vai acontecer os cenários futuros, né? Como é que a epidemia do coronavírus vai se comportar nos próximos dias no Brasil, e essa informação vai estar disponível gratuitamente para qualquer prefeitura de qualquer estado no território brasileiro. Qualquer prefeitura pode usar essa ferramenta de maneira gratuita, ter acesso de maneira gratuita, porque o que a gente quer fazer é aprimorar o sistema de vigilância em saúde para tentar resolver esse problema de dimensionamento do real impacto que a epidemia está tendo. E para finalizar minha fala, eu queria deixar aqui três pontos principais para que a gente entenda a importância da vigilância participativa e do momento atual. Vamos reforçar o uso de plataformas que já existem para gerar dados mais assertivos. Não adianta a gente estar agora, nesse momento de agonia, criando diversos aplicativos, diversas plataformas que não se conversam, que não se conectam. No nosso caso do Brasil Sem Corona, a gente está parceiro do Colab, que já é uma plataforma que está no Brasil inteiro, com mais de 300 mil usuários, e a gente acredita que isso vai ser um grande fator que vai ajudar as prefeituras a entenderem melhor a situação do coronavírus no território brasileiro. O segundo ponto que eu queria deixar para vocês é: vamos ouvir a ciência. Nesse momento, a gente não precisa de opiniões sem embasamento. A gente precisa que as evidências científicas iluminem esse escuro que a gente está vivendo. A pandemia do coronavírus é uma coisa nova para todo mundo. A gente aprende cada dia mais como andar nesse escuro. A evidência científica, ela serve como uma lanterna, onde a gente vai ali tentar enxergar alguma coisa. Isso é muito melhor do que opiniões sem basadas em nenhum fundamento científico, que só fazem atrapalhar o decorrer e as medidas de controle. E o terceiro ponto que eu queria deixar é que esse é um chamado para a colaboração, para a gente criar comunidades mais colaborativas no combate do Covid-19. Então, se você está aí no Brasil, agora, na sua casa, entra no site Brasil Sem Corona, participa, baixa o app do Colab, informa seus sintomas, se possível todo dia, porque essa informação vai fazer com que os governos, com que as prefeituras entendam melhor o que está acontecendo no território e consigam aí ter uma tomada de decisão muito mais assertiva para, de certa forma, tentar controlar essa situação que está acontecendo agora no Brasil.
Perfeito, querido Onicio. Muito obrigado pela sua grande fala. Eu queria ter muito tempo agora para a gente fazer uma discussão, mas a gente vai continuar esse papo logo depois, porque depois eu vou agora falar com a querida Vera Cordeiro, que ela vai dar o outro lado dessa história, em que ela vai realmente fazer a continuação disso. Eu vou aproveitar e trazer a Vera Cordeiro aqui, que está a grande amiga da Fundação da Associação Saúde Criança, que criou uma metodologia pioneira para promover o bem-estar das famílias em estado de vulnerabilidade social. Uma metodologia que foi reconhecida, inclusive, pela Georgetown University. E ela, há 8 anos, é considerada a melhor organização não governamental da América Latina e baseada em critérios como impacto, inovação e sustentabilidade. Então, eu convido ao nosso palco virtual, querida Vera Cordeiro.
Marcone, eu não sei como é que eu... Se eu tô já entrei, acho que já entrei ao ar, então eu quero agradecer a oportunidade de estar aqui presente nessa conferência mundial e quero falar que eu, como médica, eu trabalhei durante 20 anos no hospital público no Rio de Janeiro. E como médica eu percebi que existia um ciclo vicioso, miséria, internação, reinternação e morte. Não só para os adultos, mas principalmente para as crianças oriundas de população de baixa, extrema vulnerabilidade e que a gente não adiantava, o ato médico não se completava dentro dos hospitais públicos. Você prescrevia um antibiótico, a criança não tinha recursos nem para voltar para o hospital, quanto mais para comprar o antibiótico. Então, o que nós começamos a entender? Que existem aspectos psicossociais que são, na verdade, a causa principal da doença. Como é que essa família mora? Chove dentro da casa? Não tem saneamento básico? Quais são as condições precárias psicossociais, depressão, violência doméstica, que essa família está inserida? E o diagnóstico médico é simplesmente a ponta do iceberg. Por trás disso, existem todas essas condições que eu acabei de falar. Então, foi, na verdade, olhando para isso, que nós entendemos também que, segundo a Organização Mundial de Saúde, 1/3 das pessoas que morrem diariamente no planeta morrem por doenças relacionadas à pobreza, que seriam curadas a baixo preço, de forma não tão complicada, e não são. E segundo Amartya Sen, que é Prêmio Nobel de Economia em 1998, ele disse que se a gente quiser entender a verdadeira causa da pobreza, a gente tem que prestar atenção que a causa da pobreza está relacionada às carências vividas pela população mundial, dessa faixa econômica, socioeconômica que eu estou me referindo. Foi então que nós sentimos necessidade de ir além dos muros do hospital e criar uma organização não para substituir o Estado, mas para complementar o ato médico, para dar significado ao ato médico. Porque, na nossa opinião, o ato médico muitas vezes não tem sentido nem no Brasil, nem em vários países em desenvolvimento, porque ele não se completa, por essas razões que eu já mencionei. Nós fundamos há quase 3 décadas a Associação Saúde Criança, que criou coletivamente, ouvindo a quem a gente servia, não era de cima para baixo, mas ouvindo a quem a gente servia, uma poderosa tecnologia social chamada Plano de Ação Familiar. O que é esse Plano de Ação Familiar? Esse Plano de Ação Familiar entende saúde 360 graus. Saúde é tudo. Saúde é ter emprego, é gerar renda. Saúde é ter uma moradia minimamente digna. Saúde tem a ver com ter questões de educação. Enfim, saúde é um conjunto de áreas que realmente vão promover uma saúde sustentada que vai, beneficiar o paciente. E não algo que o paciente fica capturado num ciclo vicioso, miséria, internação, reinternação e morte. Como a pobreza ela é multidimensional, existe uma camada psicológica da pobreza, uma camada habitacional da pobreza, a metodologia multidisciplinar do Saúde Criança vai no cerne da inclusão social. E nós atendemos, ao longo desses anos, mais de 75 mil pessoas diretamente. Indiretamente, empreendedores sociais aprenderam essa tecnologia e levaram para 4 continentes. Então, milhões de pessoas no mundo estão sendo beneficiadas por essa tecnologia que foi criada, como eu te falei, ouvindo a quem a gente serve, e que é baseada na relação com as pessoas, na individualidade das pessoas e na sua sacralidade, né? De certa forma, essa metodologia leva em conta a vida individual de cada um. Como é que a gente provou a eficiência dessa metodologia? Georgetown University fez uma pesquisa e o resultado dessa pesquisa é extremamente impactante. A Sally, no Fórum School, ela disse que os determinantes sociais do adoecer já estavam, vamos dizer, no radar das pessoas, dos profissionais de saúde. Mas o Saúde Criança provou os determinantes sociais do adoecer. Porque Georgetown mostrou que 3, 5 anos pós-alta do nosso programa cai em 86% das reinternações hospitalares. A renda das famílias dobra. E 28% que não tinha casa própria 3 a 5 anos após o programa, 50% tem moradia própria. Então, se isso não é sustentabilidade, eu não sei o que é sustentabilidade. E, na verdade, por que a gente está falando sobre pobreza, sustentabilidade, na época de uma pandemia extremamente devastadora, que atinge inúmeros países, mundialmente falando? Porque a gente acha que a humanidade ela encontra 2 grandes problemas no momento. Um é a mudança climática. A outra é a desigualdade social e todos os seus desdobramentos, como violências, guerras, pandemias. Não é à toa que as pandemias muitas vezes começam nas regiões mais pobres, em populações muito pobres do nosso planeta. Então, a razão de falar sobre pobreza é que a nova medicina, a medicina 360 graus, tem que englobar esse conceito de pobreza, esse conceito que a Amartya Sen já estabeleceu sobre pobreza, esse conceito que a Organização Mundial de Saúde já falou. E, por exemplo, existem duas pesquisadoras americanas que, antes dessa pandemia, elas falavam sobre o agravamento que o isolamento social criado pela sociedade ocidental trouxe em doenças, por exemplo, cardíacas, como hipertensão arterial, infarto do miocárdio. Está provado que o isolamento social, antes da pandemia, não é o isolamento de quarentena, antes da pandemia, ele provoca um agravamento dessas doenças, assim como um agravamento na recuperação do câncer, assim como um agravamento na obesidade, no diabetes e etc. Por quê? Porque está se chegando à conclusão que as relações afetivas que as pessoas estabelecem aumentam imunologicamente, aumentam o tempo de sobrevida dos pacientes, tem um estudo de Harvard comprovando isso, e aumenta imunologicamente o padrão imunológico das pessoas. O que nós podemos fazer daqui por diante, né, para combater não só essa pandemia, como outras pandemias que virão? Então, na verdade, o fundamental, primeiro, é entender essa medicina que, na verdade, funciona, que é essa medicina 360 graus, que vai fundo na realidade do paciente e não só hospital-cêntrica, prescrevendo, e os pacientes não têm nem dinheiro nem para voltar para o hospital, entendendo e espalhando. Por exemplo, nós já estamos sendo consultores do governo federal no Brasil para expandir a nossa metodologia em toda a nação brasileira. Mas isso não é suficiente. É necessário que outros países também conheçam metodologias como a nossa ou similares que promovam a inclusão social. Só para terminar, eu gostaria de dizer que essa nova medicina 360 graus é que vai estabelecer, na verdade, uma nova relação entre nós e uma nova sociedade. Obrigada.
Obrigado, querida Vera. Quando você fala de inclusão social e quando você fala de que essa maneira de relacionamento entre as pessoas, isso seria, de repente, amor e maior inclusivo, ser mais inclusivo?
Certamente, porque eu acho que a sociedade que extremamente, de certa forma, capitalista, individualista e consumista, que nós todos estamos imersos, nessa pandemia está muito claro, né? O que nos segura no dia a dia, nessa quarentena, mundialmente falando, é o afeto, são as relações. E as famílias que vivem abaixo da linha da pobreza, elas estão privadas no dia a dia, não precisa chegar a pandemia, elas estão privadas no dia a dia de relacionamentos, porque elas têm que lutar pela sobrevida a cada dia, para o que elas vão comer naquele dia. E nós estamos fazendo um esforço institucional enorme. Nós montamos um comitê de guerra para não parar de atender a nossa população assistida, enviando remédio, alimento, não só para essa população, mas para os vizinhos. E para você ter uma ideia, no Rio de Janeiro, 1,5 milhão de pessoas vivem em favelas. Então, se a classe média alta vai ser atingida por essa pandemia, nós já sabemos. Mas imagina o terror que isso vai acontecer quando pessoas que vivem sem saneamento, sem água potável, sem água para lavar as mãos, tiver contato com esse vírus.
E, nesse caso, a aplicação que o Onicio mostrou para a gente, ela é um dos principais elementos em que a tecnologia, na mão de pessoas que podem otimizar elas, pode ser um elemento de detecção rápida e de atenção direta à saúde.
fundamental. E outro fator fundamental que nós estamos preparados e já fazendo na nossa instituição é uma linha de profissionais da área de saúde mental, porque você sabe que as pessoas estão extremamente, não só, de certa forma, contaminadas ou já adoecendo e indo para um estágio sério da doença, mas também existe uma série de pânico, que a população não tem acesso à informação. Então, quanto mais informação, às vezes ouvir a voz, não só através de instrumentos online ou de aplicativos, mas ouvir a voz humana pelo telefone, que é o que nós estamos fazendo em larga escala no Saúde Criança. Precisamos de apoio de todos para continuar fazendo, distribuindo alimentos não só para a população atendida, mas para os vizinhos da população atendida. Isso é fundamental, escutar a voz humana no telefone, aumentar vínculo, que vai aumentar a imunidade e que vai prevenir a doença.
Perfeito. Muito obrigado, Vera, pelo seu tempo e parabéns pela sua singeleza em falar de acordo com como as pessoas podem entender. Muito obrigado.
Obrigada a você.
Now we are switching over to English again. So let me introduce you to my fellows in Kenya, in Africa. So thank you all from the Portuguese session now. So we now start to feature this Kenya session called Sights and Sounds from Silicon Valley. So I will invite my dear friend Victoria Rubadiri. She will co-host this session with me, and I will introduce her as become one of the much sought after award-winning journalists, known most for her ability to connect with her audience and tell compelling stories. She also moderates high-level discussions ranging from business to climate and gender issues. Victoria has also appeared as a regular contributor on the BBC World Service Radio weekend program, helping contextualize pressing global issues impacting Africa. Victoria, welcome. This virtual stage is yours.
Thanks so much, Marconi. I hope you can hear me. We are so excited to join the world in this very important conversation on COVID-19. And we're thankful to the Boma global team for making this happen as well. You know, we've seen the impact of the coronavirus pandemic and the impact it's had on healthcare systems, on economies, on politics and culture as well. And we've had to make some rather unceremonious changes, but very necessary. And in that process, the question has been asked, how do we as Africans, and especially here for Kenya, how do we brace for the unknown? And what role does technology play in all of this? So really in this session, we're looking to have a discussion with some very brilliant minds on how we can empower people through technology and with technology. And we'll be drawing largely from the Kenyan experience, looking at bridging the information gap, boosting prevention and containment of the virus to flatten the curve. I know that's a huge buzz phrase over the last couple of weeks, how the crisis is changing the way we work and learn as well. We're all kind of cooped up at home and have to use our computers and phones to socialize, and also creating new opportunities for income generating activities. So I don't want to take too much time. I actually want to introduce the first speaker for this particular session. And it is Nivi Sharma. She's COO of BRIC, that is responsible for connecting almost 1 million people every month to free public Wi-Fi in Africa. We should be talking about bridging the digital divide to flatten the African curve. Nivi, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. So, as Victoria said, my contribution here today is titled Bridging the Digital Divide to Flatten the African Curve. I can start by acknowledging that flattening the curve isn't as simple or straightforward a tactic as the GIFs make it look like. But while we wait for treatments, while we wait for vaccines for COVID-19, the 5 main responses to stop the spread are: 1, develop and implement efficient testing and tracing measures; 2, support the healthcare system and the professionals who are heroes right now working on the front line; 3, support, as Victoria said, the continuity of economic activities, education, and other essential services; 4, leadership. Leadership that protects the vulnerable and responsibly enforces containment measures. And the 5th one that I'll talk about is educating large proportions of the population on non-pharmaceutical interventions that everyone must personally commit to partake in immediately. This includes hand washing, covering your cuffs, social distancing, and so on. The work that I do in the world today can have a huge impact on the non-pharmaceutical interventions to stop the spread, and I've been asked to talk about that today. Moja, as Victoria said, is an outdoor public Wi-Fi network that connects almost 1 million people in Africa to the internet for free every month. We reward our users for their attention and engagement with the digital currency called Moja Points. Moja Points can be used to go online, and I'll show you you can see that. Moja Points can be used to go online and connect to the internet. Our users, like many people in Africa with smartphones, want to connect to the internet, the largest, greatest network of knowledge and information in the world, and they can afford to spend time, but not money, to get online. The incentives and connections are the pipelines through which we have now started disseminating educational content on the Moja platform. So this includes videos and infographics about how and what good, responsible citizenship looks like. Unlike everyone participating in learning and talking at this virtual summit today, not everyone has the privilege of digital access. Not everyone has the privilege of being perpetually and ubiquitously online. There are 4 main barriers to connectivity. The first one is access, that is access to a smartphone, access to signal. The second one is digital literacy, and Mark will talk about this, and the third one probably as well. And the third one being relevance, relevant content, content in local languages. And the 4th and most common one is affordability. So we know today people in urban Africa are no longer huddled around radios and TV sets waiting for the government to tell them what to do. They're looking to find information and connect with others on their smartphones. So, and because Moja has addressed all 4 of these barriers, we're playing a role in bridging the digital divide. We're using that bridge to send as many PSAs in English and local languages about what to do. Wash your hands, cover your cuff, and how to do it. How to wash your hands properly, alternatives to shaking hands. The challenge we have ahead of us now is to drive behavioral change. And in order to really drive behavioral change, we need to go a step further. We need to get our continent to understand why these changes are crucial to saving millions of lives, because the paternalistic what and how approach simply won't work. We need creative ways of communicating these messages effectively to people who may not even have secondary school education. So we have lots of work to do. We have lots of work to do as a technology sector, as a global economy, as a global community. And the work of the technology sector, the tech giants, the development organizations out there must include connecting 800 million people in Africa to the information they need to both understand and fight this pandemic. The pipelines we build today will continue to bridge the digital divide for young, entrepreneurial, and astute population of Africans. And the only thing that we're missing right now is a lack of access to the global digital economy. Thank you, Victoria.
And of course, we'll be delving a bit deeper into what this means. I want to bring on board Mark Kaigwa right now. He is also in Nairobi. He's an entrepreneur and an author, and he's also the founder of Neto. It's a consultancy delivering solutions in digital strategy, communications, and data science, working across sub-Saharan Africa, right here from Nairobi. Now, his experience with social media helped him to craft a talk around social media tools. And he'll talk about how Twitter and WhatsApp are accelerating information and misinformation on COVID-19. Mark, take it away.
Sure, thank you, Victoria, and really great to follow you, Nivi. So thanks for setting this up perfectly. So first of all, for people watching, they might be wondering, where does the term Silicon Savannah come from? Well, it comes because it's a kind of catchphrase used to describe the renaissance that's happened on the continent. And if I take the Kenyan perspective, what I'll find is that over the last decade, starting in 2010, you had Africa making contributions, Kenya specifically at the time. So after the earthquake in Haiti or the tsunami in Japan, Kenya placed itself on the global map by delivering tech solutions that helped millions of people at the time congregate and visualize data. That was an organization by the name of Ushahidi. Right? And since then, over this last decade to 2010, we've continually seen Africa make a net positive contribution in times of crisis, in tough times. And I think we're on the midst or the brink of that now. So I think with COVID-19, if we're looking at Kenya, it's really built on the backbone of this mobile payments platform by the name M-Pesa. And so before there was Venmo and Apple Pay and every solution on the planet, Kenya has spent the last 13, 14, 15 years really teaching the world and creating the blueprint for that, despite being, this side of the Sahara or close to the equator. But my talk's not really about technology, it's about people, and it's about the information and literacy landscape. And if you take Twitter, you have this group of people known as KOT or Kenyans on Twitter, and they're a force to reckon with. And if you've never heard of them or come across them before, to just give you an illustration, you have CNN, which is, despite being maligned more recently, it's really respected as a global media house across the world. And amongst Kenyans on Twitter's many exploits of international celebrities and people that they've brought to book for narratives that are a bit tired about Africa or misrepresentations of the continent or its people, CNN at one point had to fly over its senior most vice president to Kenya to visit the president to deliver an apology in person, largely because Kenyans on Twitter gave them a lot of grief. And so they have the power to bring stories to the fore and to bring people to account, no matter where they sit on the planet. Now, since COVID-19, if we shift gears to present day, Nendo, my firm, just came out with a bit of research, and we put it on our Twitter feed and in an upcoming newsletter. So between the 1st and the 18th of March, there's been over 604,000 tweets that we've been able to evaluate. And within that has been some information and some misinformation. I'll try to contrast both. Now, the misinformation did come, just one of the popular ones was through a popular media broadcaster, a lady called Yvonne Okwara-Matole. She had a tweet that just went and blew up, in a sense, with over 1,800 retweets. And what she was trying to debunk was this myth that people of color or Black people don't get coronavirus. At that point, there was this rumor circulating that, oh, you know what, well, it's not for people from here. But by that point, there were actually football stars, basketball stars, people of color across the world who are actually getting sick from coronavirus. So she did her part just on her Twitter, besides the television, to update that, and that resonated really high amongst those tweets. There was human memes. There were some that made fun of Kenyans, that they would ignore the instructions to stay behind and not socialize. So those ended up getting also some engagement. A serious point was when some misinformation was, I should call it disinformation, was published about a flight and some individuals who had touched down and been released to the public. The Department of Criminal Investigation, the Directorate of Criminal Investigations here actually went out, found a person who wasn't even in Nairobi, the capital city, and actually basically arrested and arraigned this person for passing along misinformation, largely to send a signal to the public that they wouldn't tolerate that. And so you have Kenya at this point where what's made it so popular is these comedic memes and humor, and sometimes being very on the nose of being a bit aggressive with it. But there's a balance being struck now as the information diet gets determined. We're seeing positive memes being made just to help circulate and pass the message on of exactly what you should do. And that was made by a lady called Amboy JL, Al Kags, and the Aga Khan Hospital. We're seeing it being translated into local languages. So you're seeing COVID-19 information translated into Gikuyu, amongst other of the 42 different ethnic tribes here. So long story short, the top post out of this, which is a bit of a surprise, it wasn't local, was Jack Ma, the founder and the chairman of Alibaba Group. When he said he would send over 20,000 test kits to Kenya, that seemed to resonate more than any other local message. So from this, really, there was, I guess, some reflections we can take out. I think overall, Kenya has distinguished itself with both fact checkers and people determined to kind of almost poison the well from time to time if it gets some retweets, gets some clout and some content going. And so it's been a balance online with knowing who to trust and where to look. But the key battleground is actually WhatsApp. And I'm been quite excited to see South Africa in this regard lead. So before the World Health Organization, a company in South Africa called Praxis Consulting delivered a chatbot for the South African Health Ministry that up to date has had over 2 million users and deals with about 100,000 queries an hour. And the World Health Organization went to follow suit and said, we'll adopt the same technology for our version too. And so we're seeing that become the battleground. Now, sadly, there's a lot of WhatsApp forwards still moving around, memes, old images resurfacing that aren't particularly accurate. We're even seeing people repurpose mainstream media lower thirds and edit them to say that coronavirus has come out in a particular area of the country when it's not true. So the battleground in an encrypted network that's peer-to-peer and private is still the place that I think the journey continues. It's exciting to see Navy and the work that they're doing at BRIC to make sure at least if you don't have the data, you can get access to Wi-Fi or the information. And hopefully we're using cultural vehicles like Mudhoni has with just music and culture to deliver the message any which way. So in some way, somehow it sticks. So these next couple of weeks are crucial. We're looking forward to it. And for Nendo and myself, we'll continue to track it and hopefully to debunk things one forward and one post at a time. Thank you.
Seeing the use of music and popular local artists here in Kenya to pass credible and the right information to the general public when it comes to COVID-19 here in Kenya. Speaking of which, and that's a perfect segue to our last speaker for the session, Mudhoni Drama Queen. She is a musical and cultural firebrand. Her sound is timeless, thought-provoking, genre-bending, Afro-diasporic sound. You'll see what we're talking about a bit later. It is a fusion of African drum patterns, hip-hop, reggae, dancehall, and neo-soul blues. And her live performances that weave together singing, rapping, and drumming are evidence of that. She'll be speaking about the impact of the pandemic on the African creative and the real-time innovation that's needed right now to create new revenue streams. And she's titling her talk, Creativity, Uncertainty, and Silver Linings. Mudhoni, over to you.
Thanks, Victoria. I'm really happy to be here to be speaking about creativity in these uncertain times. I think one of the things that everybody can appreciate is everybody has turned to creativity in one way or another during this time. So people are stuck at home, they're watching movies, they're listening to music. If people are on the internet, they're checking out memes, so animations, they're looking at things. There's a general sense of wanting to belong to the rest of the world and to participate. So TikTok is on fire now. Everybody and their mother is making a dance video about something. The human spirit is really coming through, and we see that this is, all creativity. And I think, sorry, I just wanted to change the setting on my microphone. I think that's a really important thing for creators to start to really take note of. Obviously, for us in the creative industry, we were hit immediately, right? So I'm sure everybody has seen music festivals, big music festivals, Glastonbury, Coachella, name them. Our music festival here, we run one now for 12 years, Blankets and Wine in Nairobi. That's been cancelled because it was cancelled on the day when we were going to announce, because public gatherings, mass gatherings, and there's just really uncertainty in the music business, and from the perspective, I wear two hats, right? So from the perspective of an artist, it's loss of revenue or potential or projected revenue. There's a lot of people who take in loans, possibly versions of financing, so they could make touring work. So either buying tour vans, rehearsal spaces. So there's already a lot of money that's been put in. The music touring circuit starts around end April and would run typically all the way to mid-September. That would cover the summer, which is the bulk of touring for most artists. So there's a real loss of revenue because touring revenue is one of the few revenues in the music business that really does belong to the artist. Then, of course, there's all the people who are connected to the musicians. So sound crews, hair stylists, hair people, stylists, makeup, road crews. So there's a really huge network. Generally, it takes about 17 people in a professional team for a musician to achieve a version of commercial success. All those people, their lives are now on the line because the bulk of day-to-day earnings is made from touring. And then you have festivals like ours and many festivals around the world, which have probably already incurred quite an expense in booking artists and hotels and flights and all these things that go with music. Some have taken big financing, so there is a lot of uncertainty. It's like we slept and woke up and the music business doesn't look the same anymore. People who've been in the business for years are now out of a job. And there's uncertainty. To be fair, being an artist is generally, you generally have to have a relationship with uncertainty. Even at the highest level, there is always a lot of uncertainty that is pegged to creativity, because there's a lot of things that are just not in your hands, and commercial success, whereas it's connected to the talent and to the output, the material, it's also really a time thing. It's also a luck thing. So I think I've been reflecting this last days what I could share with creatives during this time. And my first, sort of sentence is, do not panic. And I know that sounds childish and simplistic, given that there's rent and school fees and food and medical bills. But I would say do not panic. It is in the nature of creativity, uncertainty. We're always treading uncertain waters. Even when you have like huge commercial success, you're always one song away or one film away, or, to sort of losing status, and in many times losing actual revenue. So I would say the first thing is don't panic, and to observe what this means. If the systems are no longer going to function the way they were designed, and the people who are running them are no longer the people, they're no longer the gatekeepers, or the systems just are not going to work the same. This is a moment of innovation. I think that practical things that we could do to survive this moment is to stop thinking ourselves in sort of singular ideas. So instead of thinking I am a singer, think I have the skill of singing. So could I trade somebody this skill of singing for an immediate need? Could I sell the skill of singing? I think it's time to think about networks. We're going to see groupings of artists, because even if, say, we were to get aid, and aid was to go through sort of credible music organizations, we don't really have credible music organizations. So this is a time really for the development of credible groupings. And so there's great leadership. It's a moment for great leadership. And Nivi touched on leadership that's just going to be necessary, credible, honest, caring leadership. I think it's also a great moment for creators to actually create, because we're always caught in the grind of trying to earn a living. And there's so many wonderful ideas that kind of sit on our desks, hoping and praying for time. And I think this is a really important moment to tap into that part of the creativity, to channel this energy. And I know it does sound simplistic, again, when you're facing rent and healthcare, but this is why I started by saying, do not panic. The life of a creative, the life of an artist is always treading uncertain waters. This is more dire than usual, but within it is true seeds of innovation. And I'm going to stop there, and I hope I get some cool questions from the audience.
From the listeners and viewers from around the world. So let's get into the panel discussion really quickly. I think we have just under 20 minutes to get through this. Quite a few questions coming in for Nivi and Mark. Nivi, I'll begin with you. And there's a concern here about the lack of internet access, which you alluded to in your presentation, and the impact of delivery of relevant information about COVID to those who are not connected, many of the information poor population, if you will, in Africa. What's the impact if they're not able to get this credible information because they're not on a platform due to lack of access?
So I think without the internet, when you don't have access to the internet, then people default to to TV, they default to radio, they default to newspapers, and they default to rumors, and they default to what they hear, they default to what the church tells them. So there are offline ways of getting information, but I think the way the human spirit works is we're designed to be curious, where there's hundreds or thousands of people logging in to this virtual summit because people want to learn, people want to know more, people want to ask questions, people want to engage. And for that, we need connectivity. We need to think that putting these pipelines for digital access are just as vital as pipelines for water at this stage.
And speaking of which, Mark, just to rope you in here, is a question on what has been termed as an infodemic. The overabundance of information, some of it is accurate and not, and how to kind of build an inner filter among the population and the public when it comes to sifting through what's truthful and what's not. And you were just talking about just the trouble spot that WhatsApp is in doing that, but how are we able to kind of build that in the general population?
Sure, thanks for the question. I think that one of the challenges, my team and I, just after Kenya's 2017 general election, built Africa's first false news and misinformation quiz. And so, we've done it at schools with, journalism students, or gone even to just all sorts of formal and informal areas and delivered this in person. And often it surprises people how few they can get right. It's deliberately difficult. And one of the areas that's always been, it wasn't a focus area for us, but we couldn't ignore it, was health-related claims. So you'd be surprised the types of myths and suggestions and ideas, particularly around natural and home remedies that are there, purely just related to health and food specifically. And so that's partly why I think COVID-19 has a distinct challenge, and this is across the world. So it is an infodemic in that a lot of people are saying, we have testing kits. Sometimes that's inaccurate. You had an actual institution in Kenya raided by the police and the authorities for claiming that and trying to sell them. You have people talking about a vaccine, and yet when you talk to epidemiologists or clinical researchers, it can take up to a year to get that. So the challenge now is that we have, like I think it's been suggested in the question, an infodemic of large amounts. We're being saturated with information, and our persistent hunger for more means that even if you have the same core thing, some people saying, it's not just about hand washing, it's about masks, it's about hand sanitizer, it's about this brand of hand sanitizer, etc. When there's some really simple truths behind this, but our appetite for new information can be weaponized against us. So that's part of what makes it such a delicate situation.
Yeah, and Donnie, I want to bring you in here because you talked about how uncertainty is such a big part of the creative experience. And yet with COVID-19, it's such a disruption, not just to creatives, but just the world over. How do creatives kind of set in place systems or a buffer to kind of protect themselves from this quote unquote uncertainty as COVID-19 is showing us? You talked about diversification, building credible networks, and monetizing a talent or a skill, but how do they do this to kind of buffer against something like COVID-19 that could come up?
So I think the way to think about it is a creative and their daily bread in the same, by doing something, by gifting something to the world, by putting out a piece of work. And so in that sense, very much like a person who works in a bank, a journalist, by doing a certain thing, you get a certain return. And the rules of money apply, whether you're making your money by singing or by making a movie or by teaching. And this is me just saying that generally one of the things that really has to improve within the creative sector is a real understanding of money, and just not think about money as something that is needed to make a program happen or a project happen or to put out a song or a film, but the actual day-to-day utility of money, in the same way an investor thinks about day-to-day utility of money. And I know that that's not a very, or I imagine that that's not a very short or simple answer. But the truth of the matter is, the people who are going to be able to ride COVID economically are people who have a version of reserve and a version of network and a version of skill, and somebody willing to pay for this skill, and the continuous exchange and security of income. And artists don't have security of income because 99% of the time you're relying on somebody paying you for your skill, giving you a show for you to have income. So I think now, if ever there was a time to understand, okay, we're going to have to figure out this money game, this money education, how do you make money work so that we're not really living hand to hand, gig to gig, so that we've understood how money can sort of accumulate, compound, the idea of multiple incomes. So using music to earn you one income and then putting that income in something completely less risky, or pulling the resource, being able to borrow, just principles of money. There's no getting around this, long term. And I think even more now, because the thing that we are seeing quite often, creators, we're able to trade the currency being art. We're able to trade with one another, and we're able to, sort of move. That skill is going to come in great handy in this moment, because we're really going to have to trade. It's going to come. If we think about a worst case scenario in a country like Kenya, where there are no social protections, and therefore everybody is now, swimming in the pool of uncertainty that artists are quite used to treading. There's just a heightened sense of panic and, sort of what happens. This is why I began by saying it's really important that creators in this moment do not panic. We are, in many ways, our gills are built for breathing in this kind of water, really uncertain times. And we have already figured out a trade, a currency that we use with one another. And now that the powerhouses are crumbling, maybe it's time for us to, really utilize our skill set.
And Nivi, let me bring you in here, because there's also concern about infrastructure, power, connectivity. We know that is a huge gap here on the continent, and whether organizations, governments are working hard enough to ensure that these things are in place to help get line. Just today, actually, we saw President Uhuru Kenyatta announce a partnership with Google's sister company Loon to put balloons in remote areas of Kenya to increase the 4G network across the country. Do you think is that a step in the right direction in terms of trying to cover that gap?
So, putting a balloon over Africa, that really helps the access part of the barrier. So the first barrier to connectivity, as I said, was access. So now all of a sudden, people in towns that did not have a signal have a signal. So they've got access to connectivity. That doesn't mean that they are connecting to the internet and learning about what the curve means, and reading the New York Times article about what flattening the curve means and understanding the capacity of our healthcare system. That's not what it means. It means that they now have access to connectivity, but there are other barriers that some people have. And to speak a little bit about that infrastructure and access to connectivity, the current model is a telecom, a mobile network operator will look at a group of people, and often in very rural areas, this is where we see the digital divide is between urban and rural. And they'll say those people, well, there's not very many of them, and the few that are there don't have very much money, so they don't get a tower. They don't get 3G, 4G, 2G coverage in that area. And, there's no return on investment for us. And so we've got to start innovating. We've got to let small players into that game and say, well, we can't put a $200,000 Huawei tower there, but we can put a $20,000 tower there. And we can put a model for connectivity there that doesn't require those people to reach into their pockets and take money out and pay for connectivity. So, but if we're not able to get that government regulation changed to allow for innovation in the infrastructure space, we're not gonna cover Africa with connectivity. So, we do need more terrestrial fiber options. We need more creativity and long-term thinking by regulators around spectrum allocation. the number one way of getting more people connected to the internet is changing policy around spectrum allocation. And that's just the truth. And we need governments and bilateral institutions through funding to catalyze incredibly rapid deployment of more undersea, terrestrial, and satellite backhaul. So we're seeing large tech giants like Google, Facebook, even Amazon put money into this, put money into infrastructure and connecting Africa to the internet. But there's an air level game of putting satellites up there, laying the fiber, but then there's the ground game of actually lighting that fiber up and taking those that fiber under the ground into access points that people can connect to with a device that they've paid less than $50 for.
Very important points coming out there. And Mark, I need to bring you in here when it comes to, because we're in a very unique time in terms of trying to get ahead of the pandemic. Some methods have been employed in different countries that we've seen, where countries are surveying their populations and looking at movements of people just to follow infections. But on the other side of that, you see some people saying, well, this is an infringement of privacy. And how can we monitor and regulate this space to where it's not being taken advantage of? And then also on the flip side, you have it being as a tool to empower citizens with information and to use it as a tool to protect themselves. So how do we kind of strike that balance? And just bearing in mind that we're kind of in that space here in Kenya when it comes to identity and surveillance. We had a huge identity year last year with Huduma number, which people consider as the US Social Security. We had a census last year, the data privacy bill that was signed by the president. Just kind of bearing all of that in mind, what does it mean moving forward?
Yeah, sure. I think there's a couple of schools of thought on the topic. I mean, I just saw today that some medical workers are being given a smart ring to assess their temperature at all times, just to make sure that that front line, that someone else knows that your temperature has risen to 38 or keeps rising, perhaps even before you do. And of course, like you've said, the main concern people had was, this is a great and very interesting innovation. It's just coming at a time where we can't police the privacy aspect for this health worker already working, 14, 18-hour days. So I think bringing it down to Kenya, Kenya's in a very particular position where I'd almost say privacy has taken on new meaning here, because you have millions of people who over the last 5 to 7 years have been very content to, particularly with mobile loan players, to trade their privacy for certain access to services. And so what I mean by that is that people are familiar with allowing an app to sit on their phone that uploads their call logs, uploads all their SMSs, uploads their location, uploads their browsing history, and then uses all of that to provide them an unsecured loan of, as much as, I guess, $10 up to, $700, $800, that they build, this credit profile and history to. So in a way, Kenya is unique in that we have both this outrage and this larger than life expression around the desire for privacy, and yet behaviorally, people have been trading, sometimes and many times by necessity, I have to say, their personal and private information in exchange for access, typically to capital and liquidity. And so we're expecting many of these lending companies, for example, who grew and would lend and raised, billions of dollars overseas to continue this data collection, and that data would even be stored elsewhere, that we're expecting somewhat high default rates in these coming months, just because of people's inability to earn. And even more recently, there's a question of over-indebtedness. If these Silicon Valley companies are so determined to grow at all costs, can they grow at the expense, especially around indebtedness, of Kenyans? And some really solid cases were put against all the big players here. So I think with where we are now, I do quite like author Seth Godin's perspective on privacy. He says, as long as you've got a credit card where, the trains left the station, we're so far past this privacy game that nobody can go back. And what he actually argues is it's not that we want privacy, we actually just don't want to be surprised. And so what he means by that is, you're going to spend all these things on this plastic card, which talks to your bank, etc. But what you don't want is you don't want them to put 2 and 2 together and surprise you that by connecting a few of your purchases, they say, you may want this. And so typically with questions of privacy, that element of surprise is a very provocative way to say, it's not privacy we want anymore. In Kenya, I believe that's the case. We've given away, billions and billions of data points. It's now about just controlling or giving the feeling of control, particularly around identity, as you'd said, Victoria.
And if I can add to that, Victoria, that
Definitely.
What Mark's describing is really that, the other barrier, which is, I think Deloitte did a study showing that it's even a bigger barrier to connectivity than affordability, which is digital literacy. And understanding that when I click on this, when I click on accept cookies, what the repercussions are, what privacy means, what data protection means. And, the kind of mobile money loans that Mark is describing have become rampant in Kenya are rapacious at best. And the terms and conditions you need to read and that you accept, it's a 23 grade, it's a 23-point reading grade. So you need a PhD to understand what you're signing up for. And they're not targeted at people in Africa with PhDs. I'll tell you that. So it's there's a lot to think about with what digital literacy means. Is we're bringing more people online, and yes, we're providing them more information, but also having people understand that a lot of people think of this as a privilege. They don't think twice about being connected all the time. But maybe that can be the next big African leapfrog. Is my big dream, that we can really connect to the internet in a way that's meaningful and use that for connecting with other people and ideas and thoughts.
And Nivi, I mean, if you can speak to that a bit more in terms of digital literacy, so people do interact with this space and this platform from an informed place and position, because you're so right, they're being taken advantage by, you mentioned mobile phone apps and financial literacy. How do we actually empower them in that space?
Well, it's a tough one because, like I said, the internet is the largest, greatest network of knowledge and information in the world. And yet when you look at the Western world, and you look at the average teenager and how they spend time on the internet and how they spend time on their phones, it's almost sad. So, when we present the internet to people, when we think about Moja, we think a lot about this, about how do we do this without being paternalistic. So there's some organizations that give you a walled garden of the internet. They're like, well, hello, Africa, this is health websites and education websites and no pornography for you. And, that's obviously a ridiculous way of presenting the internet to people. But, everything we do, when we think about the captive portal that you land on, when you connect to a free Moja Wi-Fi and you earn points and you're earning value for the attention you're giving. On average, we give away 3 hours of our attention every day for free. And so, if you're earning value for that and you know that I'm going to fill the survey out, I am going to tell you I'm a female, I'm going to tell you I'm 24 years old. And in exchange for that, I want you to give me value. I want you to give me value for watching that advert of yours, for filling the survey out. So if we can equalize what the internet means and how honest we're being about what we're giving and taking, then that would be great. But I recognize that's a very idealistic scenario.
Great. Muthoni, I want to kind of shift you away from the creative thread to something that you tweeted the other day. And it was kind of drawing concern to the fact that many Kenyans were not paying attention to this government directive to stay home and exercise social distancing. Some people calling it physical distancing. And you talked about people going to church on Sunday and how this could further exacerbate this case of the pandemic spreading. And this really pointed to a lack of trust from the public of government institutions, of science, if you will, and just trust in the media passing information to the general public. And this is understandable because over time that trust has been eroded. by politicians who've taken advantage of situations like this, at times the media being sensationalist and skewed facts. So, you know, some people are saying this is an opportunity to course correct, if you will, for all those institutions to regain that trust. How can that be done practically?
By not bullshitting. My apologies for this word, because so I was really frustrated, just to give some context, because the government gave a really clear directive, which was no public gatherings, no public mass gatherings. And I really think that that's, when you listen to all the science, this is a really strong step in slowing down the spread, because the virus isn't, you know, just kind of hanging out on leaves. It's literally being spread by human beings. So if you can contain, even if you couldn't possibly contain the whole society, the whole community, if you could even contain a part of that, that's definitely helping the problem. And then it would seem that the church in Kenya thought they had an opinion about this, and that their opinion, which is you should go to church, supersedes the government's directive, which is no mass gatherings. And I was really frustrated, because they say Kenya has 11 million Catholics, and I just kept thinking that you only need, you know, 1 million, like 10% of them to go to church. And because people are still moving in Kenya, it could move anyhow, it could move anywhere. We also live in Kenya. We know the healthcare system struggles on its best day. So this is not a thing that, you know, we have any kind of reserves to deal with if it got to, like epidemic level. And I recognize, I understand that it's not as simple as saying to people, stay home, right? Our economy is largely built on workers who do day-to-day work, who need to earn money on a day-to-day basis. And the people who are giving them this money, a lot of them are now, you know, I know many friends who've been told that they're going to be paid up to the end of April, and then after that, companies are just going to have to see. People are being forced to take their leave days as opposed to payouts for the leave days. There's general anxiety in, you know, corporate Kenya, and there's general anxiety in the business world. So I do understand that there is, you know, we need to figure out this movement thing. And I've been of the opinion that we have to get to mass testing yesterday, right? When you have just so many people who live in informal settlements, there's no water, there's not, you know, enough electricity. These are systemic things. They can't be fixed in a couple of days. So our president today, you know, got on TV and said, there's going to be internet so kids can learn. Okay, yeah, whatever. What people need right now is an assurance around water. That's a thing that government could say, right? So we're buying X number of reserve, X amount of water is going to be delivered to these neighborhoods, you know, in these days. Drakma gave 20,000 testing kits. I think that should be like, it's priority, high density areas, you know, and now we should already be in the conversation for who can be volunteers to support doctors, because this is the only way. Mass testing has got to be the way. We have local expertise. We have the Kenyan researcher scientist, Kemri. That's, you know, for if I think I read a thread with a Kenyan doctor who was saying, you know, since January, people have been thinking around this. And so there must be some local interventions that could have already been nurtured and supported. And it's frustrating. I'm not interested in hearing this story that even the West hasn't gotten to mass testing. So how are we going to do it in Africa? I don't care. We're not the West. We're not thinking that this is not a comparison game for if America hasn't done it. Who is Kenya to say that we can do it? That's not the game. We don't have the same social setup. When our things hit the fan, it's going to be a completely different ball game from how it looks like when it hits, you know, in Spain or in America. And it's just because generally on a good day, social protections are dire to non-existent. So we just really can't put an epidemic on this. And so this really goes back to the point that Nivi had said. There's a question of leadership, and it's also what Mark, you know, has said. For me, that's been one of the most useful things the internet has come through for me in this time, is to sort of find the people here whose voice I can trust, right? And so that has been scientists, and that has been doctors, and that's been community leaders, and to ask, so what do you need? How do you think we address that? So we can't just lock people into their homes. So how do we need to address food, shelter, clothing, electricity, internet? And these are the things that we have to figure out tomorrow, because, you know, it's only getting, you know, I really feel like we're in early days Corona in Kenya and Africa generally. We're in like early days. We missed our window to stop it. So now we have to, you know, deal with it.
Certainly, prevention and containment is the way forward. Thank you so much, Nivi, Mark, and Mudhoni. That is all the time we have for this session. Really interactive, really insightful. And I want to encourage the viewers to stick on for the next session for Boma, Brazil, which will be in Portuguese and will be led by Juliana and Marco. But before I do the handover, I think it's important to get some music therapy. And it's amazing how entertainment and the arts, you know, of course, give us that feel, but it's also healing. And it's also therapeutic at a time like this when there's a lot of uncertainty for the human soul. And so, Mudhoni, this is your moment to sing to the world.
So
thank you guys, thank you for everything. And I take this moment to thank you all for being with us this whole day. I'll invite you to join the Boma Brazil. That will be in the next few minutes. And after this session will be the Boma USA, which will be at 5 p.m. PST. So Mudhoni, the stage is all yours. Thank you very much, guys.
Thanks. So I want to begin by saying that this is a highly odd experience to be singing into a camera. But I suppose this is the new normal. So this is as good a time as any. I'm going to sing you guys maybe 3 songs. Let's see how quick I can get there. This first one, I just want you to feel good. I want you to dance a little bit. It's called Suzy Noma. It's about female friendship, female power, girls getting together and building something together. Suzy Noma. My apologies. Zoom, 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 zoom. Pull up. Let me cue the track again. Yes. Okay, here we go. Sitting at the corner, me and Suzy Noma. We ain't got no worries, we are looking like the Honda. Sipping on Coronas, looking at the phones. All them pretty boys come and tell us how they want us. Mamoni kungo ya, you tango ya. Sinada matangs, sitting at BIOHACKER'S. Planning now we want to over the world. Riding on the drums and the clap for the bass goes boom. Shake it down like. Wait till you shimmer, eh? Shake it down like. Wait till you shimmer, hey. You really know it and you really wanna show it. There's a way to go. Go and grab somebody with your body, show somebody. There's a way to go. All this I know, all this I know, all this I know. Oh, 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 oh. All this I know, all this I know, all this I know. Swimming at the corner, the answers in norm. We ain't got no money, but we do it how we want now. It's now our nails, tricking our men. So them pretty boys wanna have us, but they feel like game tango, yeah, damn tango, yeah. Side to go wax, kunakaza BIOHACKER'S. Planning now we want to over the world. Breaking on the drums and the clap of the bass goes boom. Shake it down like. Wait till you shimmer, eh? Shake it down like. Wait till you shimmer, eh? You really know it and you really wanna show it. It's a way to go. Go and grab somebody with your body, show somebody. It's a way to go. All this I know, all this I know, all this I know. All this I know, all this I know, all this I know. Now you wind your waist, now you screw your face, resuscitate the place, evacuate the place. Now I let walk for 50-50, come see, cause Now one le wako fiti comme ça. Tout ça, on me yani comme ça. Hallelujah, what you may even desire. You really know it and you really wanna shine, be the way to go. Go and drop somebody, move your body, show somebody, be the way to go. All this I know, all this I know, all this I know. Hey. All this I know, all this I know, all this I know. So this is the place where you put the applause. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then I'll play you just one more.
You got
time is short.
4 minutes. Yes.
4 minutes. So I'm going to
Let's
play
go.
you a short one. It's called Kenyan Message. And you may recognize the sample on this Grandmaster Flash. It's for a moment like this in Kenya. Let's go. Tangu wila siku tukuweleta. Aushikagi si moment tuwezi connect. Nimekuwa nikisaka an appointment. Nimekuwa nikisafa disappointment. Siku hizi sukunaga kuteli. Sima ubao wewe lunch hoteli. Panganga na mapoti beli. Koni mendi, watchmendi. Wanakupangia wakikusalimia. Na we uwezi notice hata uwezi dhania. Siku hizi country yote venye kuna njaa. Kila mtu anafikiria tuchupa. Don't push me, cause I'm close to the edge. I'm trying not to lose my head. Me come a tango sometimes when me uwanda mbona sija enda anda. Me come a tango sometimes when me uwanda mbona sija enda anda. Me come a tango sometimes when me uwanda sija enda anda. Me come a tango sometimes when me uwanda mbona sija enda anda. And wale wana don't need 1%. Si umaonaga siku ya parent. Si ukuwaga ndani ya predicament. Big S and government and church officials. Miracles are so artificial. Congregation wako so superficial. Wanataka ule Mungu mu beneficial. Unofficial, tambulisho. Unaweza get in a few days. Unaweza get in a few ways. Unaweza get bila delays. Nowadays, wasia kuna madokta. Gava haijali tu sisi wagonjwa tukienda private. Tutapay, so ni obvious. Nani ana say, don't push me, cause I'm close to the edge. I'm trying not to lose my head. Me come and tango sometimes when me uwanda mbona sija enda anda. Me come and tango sometimes when me uwanda mbona sija enda anda. Me come and tango sometimes when me uwanda mbona sija enda anda. Me come and tango sometimes when me uwanda mbona sija enda anda. I say yo, we can't breathe. No, we can't breathe. No, we can't breathe. Can't breathe. Can't breathe.
Thank you. See you, everyone. Bye-bye.